Coming up on The World Today. Israel's Prime Minister vows to investigate crush at a crowded religious festival that left at least 45 dead. India records another record daily rise of coronavirus cases as officials say Delhi is running out of space for cremations. Plus, Pakistan and Tajikistan border dispute, 31 killed in clashes at the border. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shoboale. We begin with some tragic news as Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has promised to investigate a crush at a crowded religious festival that left at least 45 people dead. Visiting the scene near Mount Meron, he said it was one of the worst disasters the country had known, and a probe would ensure it did not happen again.
Dozens of people were killed in the crush at a religious bonfire festival in Israel, after tens of thousands of ultra-Orthodox Jews had gathered at the Mount Meron tomb for the annual Lag Bomer commemorations, which include all-night prayer and dance. Ecstatic crowds congregated despite warnings from public health officials. Witnesses say they realized people had been tramped when an organizer appealed over a loudspeaker for the crowds to disperse.
We were standing and waiting for our friends. We were going to go inside for the dancing and stuff. And all of a sudden we saw paramedics from Mada and whatever running by, like mid-CPR on kids. And then one after the other started coming out, ambulances. Then we understood like something's going on here. And we just went to the side as the ambulances were driving in and out. And we waited until we were able to slowly get out.
The National Emergency Medical Service said over 100 people had been injured, with dozens dead. Videos on social media showed chaotic scenes as ultra-Orthodox men tried to push through walls of iron to escape the crush. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited the site on Mount Meron, saying the terrible disaster was one of the worst in the country's history, adding that Sunday would be a day of national mourning. The tomb at Mount Meron is an annual pilgrimage site, one of the holiest sites in the Jewish world. Private bonfires at Mount Meron were banned last year due to public health restrictions. But lockdown measures were eased this year as a result of the country's rapid vaccination rollout.
Let's check in on the COVID-19 situation in India now. India has posted yet another record daily rise in coronavirus cases as hospitals across the country run out of beds and oxygen. Officials in Delhi have also been urged to find more sites for cremations as the city's morgues and crematoriums are overwhelmed by masses of COVID-19 deaths.
Another day, another world record number of daily infections as thousands of Indians search frantically for hospital beds and life-saving oxygen for sick relatives. India reported over 380,000 new cases in the past 24 hours, while deaths from COVID-19 jumped by 3,498. However, medical experts believe actual COVID-19 numbers may be 5 to 10 times greater than the official tally. The situation is so critical that hospital beds that become available, especially in intensive care units, are snapped up in minutes.
Any fever, sister?
No, sir.
Crematoriums are also overwhelmed with the influx of bodies, with some cremated in makeshift pyres in parks and parking lots. Amid the record surge of cases, a group of dentists in Mumbai have joined the frontline battle to treat COVID-19 patients.
Somebody has to be there to save lives. And if we are there and we are here since 1 year, we are the most experienced. If at this point of time we run away from the field and a new person comes, they may not be able to handle it that well.
All vaccination centers in India's financial capital of Mumbai have been shut for 3 days due to a shortage of vaccines. India is the world's biggest producer of vaccines, but does not have enough stockpiles to keep up with the second deadly COVID-19 wave, despite Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government planning to vaccinate all adults starting from May 1st.
We were preparing for the vaccination campaign and we started mega campaigns also. We trained thousands of our healthcare workers and doctors, etc., to start this mega vaccination campaign. But there is no vaccine with us.
Only about 9% of India's 1.4 billion people have received a vaccine dose since January. In the meantime, help has been trickling in. The first US plane carrying more than 400 oxygen cylinders and other hospital equipment and nearly 1 million rapid coronavirus test kits has landed at New Delhi's International Airport. The US has also redirected its own order of AstraZeneca supplies to India to allow it to make more than 20 million doses. India has also received shipments from other countries including United Kingdom, the UAE, Thailand, Romania and Ireland.
All over in Brazil, the number of deaths related to the virus has passed 400,000, the second highest in the world as the country continues to struggle with its vaccination program. There were 3,001 deaths in 24 hours after a peak of more than 4,000 was reached at the start of April. The 14-day average of deaths and cases remains high, but has seen a slight fall. Congress has opened an investigation into the government's handling of the pandemic. President Jair Bolsonaro, who has frequently spoken out against lockdowns, masks and defended unproved drugs as treatment, is facing widespread criticism and his support has plummeted. To other stories now, Joe Biden has spent his first 100 days as U.S. president focusing on a series of issues facing the country, from immigration and the economy to COVID-19 and the climate. Our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird, reports on his achievements so far.
Just 100 days ago, America entered a new chapter in the history books as President Biden made many promises for change.
This is America's day. 100 million shots in the first 100 days.
One of President Biden's most notable promises was 100 million shots in the first 100 days. Biden eclipsed that number and was able to deliver 290 million.
America had no real plan to vaccinate most of the country. That changed the moment we took office.
Close to 3,000 people per day were dying as a result of COVID-19 when Biden took office, and today that number is just under 700.
By tomorrow, we will have distributed 100 million of those checks.
On the economy, Biden pressed Congress to pass a $1.9 trillion stimulus bill, the America Rescue Plan, a promise that Biden made on the campaign trail. Economic growth in the U.S. is expected to top 7% this year, the fastest growth since 1984, and nearly 1 million jobs were added to the workforce in March.
We're going to work to undo the moral and national shame of the previous administration that literally, not figuratively, ripped children from the arms of their families, their mothers and fathers at the border.
Even though the Biden administration has rushed to open thousands of shelters for migrant children at the border, the immigration challenges persist as there has been an increase in the number of migrants at the border. Polls have shown that Biden has a 55% approval rating in his first 100 days, a level the previous administration never received in 4 years. From Washington, Maria Bird, Channel Television News.
U.S. and international affairs analyst Calvin Dark joins us now to take a look at President Biden's first 100 days in office. Calvin, thank you so much for joining us on The World Today.
Thank you.
Before being elected president, Joe Biden promised he could accomplish a lot of things in his first 100 days in office. Things to do with immigration, the economy, and of course, COVID-19. How would you rate his first 100 days in office?
Well, I think the main thing to point out is that there were two things that President Biden had to do, and he really didn't have a choice. The first was to make a contrast between himself and Donald Trump, the former president, because that's why an unprecedented number of Americans came out to vote, because they wanted to see a difference, not only in deed, but in word. And so from that standpoint, from day one, with reversing some of the executive orders and some of the policies that of the Trump administration that voters found just absolutely horrible, he has succeeded in that sense. The second challenge that he didn't choose, but he had to face, was COVID-19, is COVID-19, because we're still dealing with it. And on that measure, as we just saw, he set a goal in December before he took office and exceeded it last week, doubled it by last week. So while I still think there's a lot that remains to be seen for the final grade, I think he's done a good job in addressing the challenges that he had to face.
You know, speaking of the contrast between President Biden and former President Donald Trump, let's talk about foreign policy. President Biden has switched U.S. foreign policy back to a more multilateral stance compared to former President Donald Trump. How is this working out so far for him, though, especially with the likes of China and Iran?
Well, I think that with the international challenges with Iran and China, also Yemen, other crises around the world that the U.S. Is implicated in because of our interests there, it remains to be seen if his new foreign policy team, if they have the plans and the know-how to fix it. But what is true is that the world knows, our allies and our adversaries, that the U.S. is back on the world stage, not America alone, which Donald Trump called America first. It didn't really turn out like that. But our allies now know where we stand. And we are now cooperating, and not just in crises of war, but also on the COVID-19 crisis, joining the international effort to address that, as well as on climate. So for international issues, Joe Biden has shown that we are back, as he said, on the national stage. We'd have to see if his plans are going to work.
Let's move back home now. You know, police reform. There's also the issue of gun violence, which has reared its ugly head in the United States with the easing of lockdown. Former presidents have tried and failed to introduce gun laws. Do you see President Biden being successful in changing the trend?
Well, I always try to be optimistic, but my honest opinion is when it comes to guns and the disease that is gun and gun ownership in this country, I hope that President Biden can do something, but it's doubtful. But I do think that on police reform, there is an opportunity for real reform and real change. That's something that I've seen, especially with Republicans, who have decided, for the first time in a long time, that they are willing to compromise and actually try to solve this. So on police reform, I think it's possible. On gun reform, I hope it changes, but it doesn't look likely.
All right, then, Calvin, a lot to look ahead to for President Biden's administration. Thank you so much for joining us on The World Today.
Thank you.
Still to come on the program. Portugal opens world's longest suspended footbridge. Be warned, though, it's definitely not for the faint-hearted. More in a moment. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. At least 31 people have been killed, scores injured, and 10,000 evacuated after a water dispute led to some of the worst clashes in years on a disputed Kyrgyzstan-Tajikistan border. Clashes started on Wednesday when people from both sides hurled stones at each other after surveillance cameras were installed at a water facility. A truce and troop pullback were agreed, but some shooting appeared to continue. The casualty figures were from the Kyrgyzstan side, with Tajik numbers unclear. The Zulu royal family in South Africa has announced the death of its monarch queen just a month after she became regent. The 65-year-old Shiyiwe Manfumbi Dlamini Zulu became interim leader of the country's largest ethnic group last month after the death of her husband, King Goodwill Zwelithini. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has offered his condolences to the Zulu royal family and the Zulu nation, saying the country's thoughts, prayers and hearts were with them in what he called this hour of compounded grief. The Queen's Prime Minister said her death had taken the family by surprise and they were utterly bereft. He also dismisses all rumors that the Queen had been poisoned. A successor to ruler of the 11 million strong nation has not yet been named, as the Queen's death raises uncertainty about the succession process within the Zulu royal house.
It is with the deepest shock and distress that the royal family announces the unexpected passing of Her Majesty Queen Shiyiwe Mantombi Dlamini Zulu, the regent of the Zulu nation. This has taken us by surprise and left us utterly bereft. It is true that the Lord alone knows the days that He has allotted to each one of us. On behalf of the royal family, I wish to assure the nation that while we are all rightly grief-stricken, there will be no leadership vacuum in the Zulu nation. Further announcements on Her Majesty's funeral and the necessary arrangements will be made in due course. May Her Majesty, our regent, rest in peace.
Now, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, is asking for more support to help Burundians, refugees who are choosing to go back home. Ending a two-day visit to Burundi, Commissioner Grandi praised the process made towards helping refugees find long-term solutions in the heart of Africa's Great Lakes region. He met a group traveling from Rwanda, hearing firsthand about their hopes and concerns. Grandi notes that in a region known for violent and complex conflicts resulting in forced displacement, he has been encouraged to see an increased focus on finding solutions for refugees, especially for Burundians.
What is now very important is for those who go back to Burundi to ensure that their return is sustainable. That they are safe, that they can have access to jobs, to services. I saw some kids that haven't gone to school for quite some time, so it will be important that once they're back home, they can have access to all this.
The World Food Programme says an unrelenting drought in southern Madagascar is forcing hundreds of thousands of people to the brink of famine. According to a UN spokesperson, Farhan Haq, at least 1.35 million people need emergency food and nutrition assistance. The accused malnutrition among children under 5 has almost doubled over the last 4 months.
The World Food Programme is telling us that unrelenting drought in southern Madagascar is forcing hundreds of thousands of people to the brink of famine. At least 1.35 million people need emergency food and nutrition assistance. Acute malnutrition in children under 5 has almost doubled over the last 4 months. A recent assessment conducted by the Ministry of Health states that 16.5% of children in the south are suffering from malnutrition. In one district, the malnutrition rates have crossed 27%. Currently, up to 80% of the population in certain areas in the south is resorting to desperate survival measures such as eating locusts, raw red cactus fruits, or wild leaves. The 2021 harvest prospects are poor. Food production this year is expected to be less than 40% of the last 5-year average. WFP has been progressively assisting up to 750,000 people through food and cash distributions each month. The agency is calling for $74 million to finance operations for the next 6 months.
Relatives of the 53 Indonesian Navy crew members who died in a sunken submarine have paid tribute at a ceremony at sea. The German-built Nanggala 402 was discovered at a depth of nearly 840 meters on Sunday, broken into at least 3 parts 4 days after it lost contact while preparing to conduct a torpedo drill. Retrieval operations are still ongoing at sea with help from international search teams as authorities struggle to figure out how to lift the wreckage. Experts warn that it will be a daunting task to lift the submarine to the surface, requiring specialized salvage equipment. Indonesia operates 5 submarines, 2 German-built Type 209s, including Nanggala, and 3 newer South Korean vessels. It has been seeking to modernize its defense capabilities, but some of its equipment is old and there have been fatal accidents in recent years. Some lighter stories now. Look away now if you're scared of heights. The world's longest pedestrian suspension bridge has just opened in Portugal. Authorities are hoping to pull in tourists, but crossing the longest suspended pedestrian bridge is not for the faint-hearted. It hangs on heavy steel cables strung between V-shaped concrete towers and runs 516 meters across a canyon at a height of 175 meters. Take a look.
Hugo Xavier was one of the first people to cross the world's longest pedestrian suspension bridge when it opened on Thursday, April the 29th, near his tiny hometown of Aruca in northern Portugal. With some words of self-encouragement, the 42-year-old gathers enough courage to step onto the see-through metal grid pathway of the 516-meter-long bridge alongside his equally jittery partner and a tour guide. Hidden between rock-strewn mountains covered with lush greenery and yellow flowers inside the UNESCO-recognized Aruca Geopark, the bridge hangs 175 meters above the fast-flowing river Paiva. The landscape is calm, but the crossing is not for the faint-hearted. Held up by steel cables and 2 massive towers on each side, it wobbles a little with every step.
I confess, I was a little afraid, but it was worth it because it is extraordinary, a unique experience, and one that I highly recommend. It is indeed an incredible adrenaline rush, to be there so high, to feel the bridge shaking a little, to look down and see the running river. It's incredible.
Standing on the bridge, the mayor of Aruca, Margarida Bellem, says the bridge is part of a wider strategy to encourage more people to move and stay in the region.
The biggest suspended pedestrian bridge in the world is here, a bridge with a grid that allows transparency and total integration with the landscape. There were many challenges that we had to overcome to have this work done here, but we did it.
Locals say they are hopeful the new attraction, which cost about 2.3 million euros and took around 2 years to build, will help revive the region, especially after the devastating COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, there you go, something to look forward to trying out. You can count me out of that, though. And that's the world today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Tenyo Olash Shoboale. Bye for now.